February 23, 1944. Luftwaffe Air Command, Northern France. The morning orders came sealed in gray envelopes stamped Geheim. Secret. Inside were coordinates for what seemed like a perfect ambush. Allied bombers were expected to cross over the channel in tight formation, on their way to strike industrial targets near Hanover. The Luftwaffe's elite interceptor wing, Jagdgeschwader 26, known across the front as the Abbeville Boys, would rise to meet them. For months, the German High Command had watched the Americans grow bolder, sending larger and larger daylight raids deeper into occupied Europe. Their flying fortresses filled the sky like migrating flocks. Slow, predictable, vulnerable to precision attack. The Luftwaffe still believed that skill and strategy could outweigh numbers, and JG-26 was their proof. These were veterans of the Battle of Britain, men who had survived years of combat and outflown the best pilots. America could train. Oberstleutnant Karl Brenner, the squadron commander, stood in the operations room studying a map spread across a steel table. Red lines traced the projected bomber routes. Blue arcs marked interception zones. The plan was flawless. Timing, altitude, and coordination all worked out to the second. The Allies, he thought, would lose another 20 bombers before they even reached the German border. But there was one thing Brenner didn't know. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, deep inside a reinforced radio van on the English coast, a single American radio operator named Sergeant Thomas Hale was listening, not to the German pilots' chatter, but to the frequencies they thought were unbreakable. The Luftwaffe had been proud of their radio discipline. Encrypted call signs, rotating codes, short transmission bursts, all textbook precision. Yet Hale had spent weeks building a pattern, learning their habits the way a hunter learns the steps of his prey. His headphones crackled with faint German voices, coordinates, timing signals. Every syllable was another piece of a puzzle he'd been assembling in silence. Back in France, the German pilots climbed into their FW-1990 fighters, engines growling to life across the frozen airfield. Mechanics saluted, fuel trucks rolled away, and the first aircraft began to taxi. Brenner's voice came through the command frequency. Steady, confident, practiced. All units, climb to 12,000. Hold until signal from ground radar. We will strike them head-on. The squadron took to the air, banking over the gray coastline, contrails slicing the sky in perfect formation. Below them, the channel shimmered cold and flat, dotted with small ships like black grains. In the command room, German operators tracked the blips on radar screens, calling out headings. The American bombers they expected weren't where the reports had said they'd be. Instead, the radar screens flickered, with ghost signals, false echoes, appearing on multiple bearings. Brenner's headset filled with static. Then came what seemed like an authentic German transmission, a coded update from ground control, ordering a course adjustment. He followed it without hesitation. But it wasn't German ground control. It was Sergeant Hale, transmitting from a mobile command van hidden beneath camouflage netting in southern England using a captured Luftwaffe radio set and mimicking their encryption patterns perfectly. The Luftwaffe's best were about to fly into an empty sky and give away their position to waiting American fighters. The roar of the FW-190s echoed through the cold February sky as Oberstleutnant Brenner's squadron sliced toward the channel. The formation was tight, every pilot trusting the voice of ground control, guiding them across invisible air corridors. Turn heading 085. Climb to 14,000. The order came crisp and clear over the radio, the same clipped German tone they had always followed. But this time, the voice wasn't coming from France. Inside a dimly lit mobile van near Dover, Sergeant Thomas Hale sat hunched over a map, sweat beading under his headphones. Around him, the tiny space buzzed with radio chatter and the low hum of decoding equipment. His commanding officer, Captain Morgan, leaned in. "You're sure they'll follow?" "They already have," Hale muttered. German discipline. They never question command, not until it's too late. Outside, the British radar stations had been feeding Hale precise readings of every German aircraft now heading out to sea. The real American bombers were hundreds of miles away, flying an entirely different route. Hale's decoy transmissions had drawn the Luftwaffe, far off course, over open water, with no enemy in sight. Back in the air, Brenner's wing began to feel uneasy. Minutes passed. No bombers, no targets, only static. "Ground control, confirm target bearing," Brenner called. A brief pause. Then Hale's cool imitation voice replied, "Maintain course. Contact expected in 2 minutes." But 2 minutes turned to 5. Then 10. The German pilots' fuel gauges began to dip dangerously low. Their flight engineer, Hauptmann Weiss, broke formation slightly. "Sir, if we don't turn back soon, we'll be short on fuel." Brenner hesitated. The orders had come from ground control. They had to be right. And yet, the horizon was empty. At that exact moment, Hale made his final move. He switched frequencies and transmitted a short burst of false radar coordinates, deliberately, feeding the Germans a position that intersected perfectly with a returning American escort group of P-47 Thunderbolts. Within minutes, Brenner's men spotted silver glints in the distance. "Target sighted! Bombers ahead!" one shouted. But they weren't bombers. The sky exploded with tracer fire as the P-47s dove from above, guns blazing. The Luftwaffe formation scattered in panic. Hale removed his headphones, staring at the static on the receiver as if he could still hear the chaos he had unleashed. Back in France, German command frantically called their missing squadron. No response. The Abbeville boys, their finest interceptors, were gone. In just one operation, a single radio operator had outsmarted the Luftwaffe's best and turned their precision into confusion. By nightfall, the airfields of northern France were littered with empty runways and fuel trucks, waiting for planes that would never return. In the control bunker at Abbeville, a grim silence hung over the officers. The mission log showed 28 aircraft launched, and only 4 had made it back. The survivors staggered from their cockpits, faces pale, hands trembling. "They weren't bombers," one muttered. "They were American fighters. They knew exactly where we were." Oberstleutnant Brenner sat in stunned disbelief. His squadron, the pride of Jagdgeschwader 26, had been annihilated not by superior numbers, but by an invisible hand guiding them into a trap. German intelligence moved quickly. Intercept logs were pulled, frequency charts examined, every transmission from ground control replayed. And then the realization hit. The voice giving commands that day had never come from any German station. The Luftwaffe had been speaking to a ghost. Across the channel in a concealed Allied outpost near Dover, the men of the Signal Intelligence Unit celebrated quietly. Hale sat apart from the others, staring at the blinking radio lights. He knew what they'd done wasn't just a tactical win. It was psychological warfare. By mimicking German radio procedures down to the syllable, by copying their frequency jumps and tonal cues, he had turned their greatest strength, discipline and trust in command, into a weapon against them. Days later, reports poured in from Allied reconnaissance flights. Entire Luftwaffe sectors were shifting communication protocols, scrambling to encrypt new frequencies. Hale's deception had thrown the German air defense network into paralysis. For weeks, bomber groups flew with reduced interception, striking factories and fuel depots that once would have been protected. The official communiqué from London was brief, almost understated. Enemy air activity along the channel has decreased significantly, following a successful counterintelligence maneuver. But within the halls of Allied command, they knew the truth. A single American radio operator had just changed the rhythm of the air war, without ever leaving the ground. That night, as Hale left the bunker, he looked out over the black waters of the channel. Somewhere out there, the enemy was still listening. And now, they were afraid of what they might hear. March 2, 1944. Somewhere over the North Sea, the Luftwaffe was desperate to reclaim the skies. Within a week of the Abbeville disaster, Berlin had issued new orders: change all frequencies, revise call signs, encrypt every signal with the new Enigma variant. Field operators now spoke in clipped bursts, terrified of phantom voices. But the paranoia did more damage than Allied bombs ever could. Squadrons missed launch orders. Convoys turned back mid-route. An entire interceptor wing at Lille sat grounded for 2 hours, because no one trusted the signal telling them to take off. Deep in a command bunker near Calais, German officers pored over maps, plotting a counter-trap. They would trace the source of the rogue transmissions, triangulate its signal, and send a night raid to silence it forever. Across the channel, James Hale was already one step ahead. Allied codebreakers had intercepted. German chatter about Operation Donnernett's Thundernet. The hunt for the ghost operator. Hale volunteered to stay behind in the Dover bunker while the rest of the unit relocated to an inland post. He insisted on transmitting one last message. At precisely 21, his transmitter came alive. The same calm, clipped German voice echoed across the airwaves. To the Luftwaffe listening posts, it sounded like a priority order from command. The message contained coordinates, altitude data, and a target reference for an Allied bomber group supposedly en route to Kassel. German radar screens flared to life. Dozens of fighters took off from northern France, racing eastward, away from the real Allied formations crossing the coast near Cherbourg. When the Luftwaffe realized they had been duped again, it was too late. American B-17s and P-51s roared through the night, striking key fuel dumps and airfields with devastating precision. The sky over Europe lit up with fire, the unmistakable mark of American air supremacy. Back in Dover, Hale switched off his transmitter. The vacuum tubes glowed red for a final moment, then faded to black. He sat in the silence, exhausted, sweat running down his neck. Hours later, a coded telegram arrived from Air Command. Mission confirmed. Enemy communications collapse. No losses reported. For the first time in the war, the Luftwaffe was not feared. It was confused, hunted, and blind. A single operator with a steady hand and a fluent command of the enemy's own language had outmaneuvered the best pilots in Europe. By dawn, Allied air dominance was complete. From that day forward, the Germans never trusted their own sky again.